Universal Studios' 1931 masterpiece Dracula is a revered classic. And yet, that doesn't mean it's a fun film for everybody. Lots and lots of people go into this film expecting it to be as enjoyable as James Whale's Frankenstein, or The Wolfman, or The Invisible Man, or The Mummy, and struggle with actually getting through the film. If you're a classic die-hard fan of these films, that might sound shocking to you, and yet it's true. There's something about, or rather numerous things about, the 1931 Todd Browning Dracula film that make it hard to get into. As somebody who struggled with this myself, somebody who's a huge fan of the classic horror films, Universal and before, somebody who loves Bela Lugosi from his later work, I spent a long time struggling with Dracula, trying to figure out why everybody else enjoyed it and I didn't. If you're in that category, or if you're somebody who enjoys the film and is just looking to enjoy it even more, that's what I'm here to help you with today. So I'm going to show you 5 different ways in which you've been watching Dracula wrong. So, sit tight, let me walk you through this, and help make you an even bigger fan of a classic film that everybody should be able to enjoy. Number 1, you're watching Bela Lugosi wrong. Today you have your pick of vampire films to choose from 1922's Nosferatu, where Max Schreck played a very terrifying and creepy-looking vampire, to the 1950s and 1960s Christopher Lee, who was a violent, wild beast of a vampire, to more modern tellings as well, from Francis Ford Coppola to sparkly vampires people fall in love with, to Last Voyage of the Demeter and Renfield. Lots and lots and lots of choices of where to go for your vampire. So Bela Lugosi, wearing a fancy suit and respectfully bowing to people and speaking with elegance and grace and charm, might not seem like the kind of Dracula you're going to enjoy. And yet that's absolutely the point. You see, Dracula is a film based upon a stage show, which was in turn based upon a novel. And that novel was not designed to be an action-packed, blood-soaked gore fest. Instead, it was much more of an existential dread. And that dread was immigration. See, Bela Lugosi is playing a graceful, polite, genteel, respectful, wealthy character who's doing everything that signals to society this is a good person you can trust and look up to and respect. And yet he betrays a darkness beneath that veneer of respect. It absolutely is the point that he comes from another country and is on your street and might be eyeing your daughter and might have strange customs that are alien and different that you'll only see if you go in his basement. And that's what Bela Lugosi is playing up. Even though he's respectful and kind and polite, it is all an act for an inhuman, amoral monster who wouldn't think twice about killing you and taking away everything you love. When you think about the other monsters of this time period, the Frankenstein monster is actually a naive and almost sweet childlike creature that only turns to violence and murder as a last resort. When you look at the Wolfman, he's a conflicted character who doesn't want to kill. The Mummy is primarily inspired by love and only kills when it becomes necessary for achieving his goal. Even the Invisible Man is on the brink of madness and really didn't go into things intending to kill anybody. It just sort of happened. But Dracula, he's a legitimate existential monster in that he'll smile at you, but his eyes are staring at your throat and imagining ripping it to pieces and drinking your blood dry. Number 2, you're applying historical context wrong. Believe it or not, in 1931, the idea of a monster on film was difficult for people to understand and wrap their heads around. And I mean in America only, because in America, I want to be very clear, and only in America, there had never been a monster on film for general audiences to see before. Sure, there'd been horror films. The Phantom of the Opera is actually just a deformed dude trying to achieve his goals of revenge and love. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is just a deformed human being. Even going back to 1926's The Bat, or 1927's London After Midnight, while there appeared to be a monster at the heart of it all, it was actually a ruse. Just a person creating a fake monster as a means of achieving their goals. Sure, you had the Edison Frankenstein way earlier on, but that was played for much smaller audiences and not mass movie houses because they didn't exist yet. And in Germany and other countries across the sea, there were tons of horror films by this point. But for whatever reason, American filmgoers had been spared this. There always had to be an explanation. It wasn't really the supernatural. So, having this guy who seems sweet and kind, but actually is a monster, and it's not an act, that was terrifying for people. There's a reason why that film is littered with comical characters who don't make sense in oddly timed humorous moments that come right after the most intense ones. It's because the filmmakers are actually terrified that people are going to faint and have heart attacks in their seats. The very thought of a monster who kills was an alien concept back then that we take for granted today. And the fact that he could smile and walk into your house and into your living room and sit down and charm you with a story and a bit of humor made him even more terrifying. Number 3, you're misunderstanding the structure of the story. If Dracula were a YouTube video, most people would quit around 20 minutes in. It's odd that the film actually begins with its most intense and scary and delightful parts, when we're at Castle Dracula and see those little creatures scurrying on the ground as Dracula emerges from the top of the creepy staircase and says,
"Listen to them, children of the night. What music they make."
It's creepy, it's fun. He has his first real attack on a human being, Renfield, who we first think is dead until we find out what happened to him later on. Even when the boat washes up in England and Renfield's at the bottom of the stairs cackling maniacally, that's good stuff. And then suddenly, we're in a parlor room. And we spend most of the rest of the film with people sitting around and talking. And the big showdown between Van Helsing and Dracula happens in the form of embarrassing and insulting each other in front of guests.
I mistrust my own judgment. Look.
That's a horror film? If you have modern sensibilities, this is a very strange arrangement indeed. But you need to consider, once again, we've talked about what Bela Lugosi is trying to portray, and the fact that audiences had never seen a true monster before, because we're used to the idea that there is a way to take these monsters down.
Certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
Whereas back then, the idea of being in a room with an undying creature that sucks people's blood, that was game over. There was no plan. There was no way of stopping it. This was hopeless. This was a done deed. Essentially, those drawing room scenes are filled with tension because the audience knows Dracula is just teasing with them. He could end this at any given point. So when he leaves after Van Helsing outs him, and he says,
Dr. Seward, my humble apology. I dislike mirrors. Van Helsing will explain.
He's not actually upset. He's playing a game. In fact, it's repeatedly suggested that he gets off on this little way of toying with his victims. He could suck the blood of any person. Why go for Lucy and then Mina? Because it's fun, because toying with these people is fun for him. The fact that he's ultimately defeated is a great unexpected development at the end of the film. Nobody would have seen that coming. Instead, it's this dread of, he seems polite, he seems dashing, but oh my gosh, what's he going to do to these people? Modern audiences lose that. Number 4. You're watching Mina and Jonathan wrong. Modern audiences are also used to the idea that we're supposed to root for and like our protagonists. And it's therefore a little bit challenging that Mina and Jonathan, the lovely couple at the center of all this, are dry, boring characters.
And you mustn't kiss me. Ever again.
What are you trying to say?
And that's not the fault of the actors playing them, who have done some really amazing things in other roles. It's actually demanded by the script and the film, because this goes back to the historical context of the production company not wanting to terrify people too much. You see, if you're attached to a character, Their death, or even being in a potentially deathly situation, is deeply unsettling. But if you feel nothing for the characters, or even better yet, kind of actively dislike them, it makes it far more tasteful to see them come across the undead. So, by not liking Mina and Jonathan, by being a little bit annoyed by them, and by, heaven forbid, actually liking the monster more, it makes their dangerous situation more palatable. It makes it more tolerable, and in a sense can almost actually make it fun. Next time through watching this movie, try actively rooting against Mina and Jonathan instead of trying to find something likable about them, and you'll enjoy the film a whole lot more. Number 5. You're using the wrong audio track. Dracula was made early on in the era of talking films. And this was Todd Browning's first talking film. He'd been making silent films for many years before this came about. So as a result, he was unfamiliar with this new territory. And you can feel that in the film that's full of awkward silences and empty spaces where nothing appears to be happening. But much like watching Wizard of Oz with Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon playing in the background, when you use the right music, you realize there's so much more going on in the film that you missed when those empty spaces of soundlessness can become overwhelming. Several decades back, modern composer Philip Glass created an alternate audio track for Dracula that's available on almost every home video release of the film that's been made since the advent of DVD. If you're an old fogey like me, clinging on to your physical media, there's a very, very good chance that your DVD or your Blu-ray of Dracula has in its special features an alternate Philip Glass audio track. I strongly suggest that you put it on because, whether or not you like Philip Glass's style, he fills in those empty spaces. And when you're listening to his track, there actually is a pacing, there's a speed, a momentum to the film that is otherwise lost by those empty spaces of silence. So, put it on, you'll see the film goes faster and feels a lot more exciting and a lot less awkward in those places where it otherwise begins to lose you. Putting these 5 things together, the next time you go back to watch Dracula, you should have a much more enjoyable experience. When you understand why Bela Lugosi is playing a very polite, respectful vampire as opposed to a terrifying monster. When you understand the importance of this being the first time American audiences had ever seen an actual monster, or supposed actual monster, on screen. When you understand the structure of the story and the imminent tension and danger in Dracula hanging out in the drawing room with Mina and Jonathan and their family. When you understand that Mina and Jonathan are supposed to be unlikable. You're not supposed to be attached to them. You're supposed to resent them a little bit. And finally, by using the Philip Glass audio track, you might find Dracula to be a far more enjoyable experience. I certainly hope you'll give it a try and let me know how it goes in the comments. And if you're looking to have even more conversation about Dracula and all sorts of other creepy classic films, and in fact anything nerdy, come check us out at classiccomics.org, where the CCF is happy to get to know you on a more personal level with a really knowledgeable and friendly group of people who actually like to get to know the whole person and not just get anonymous replies and likes. Come check us out at classiccomics.org. And of course, check out the rest of our content. Liking and subscribing helps us a lot, and we'll see you next time. Stay weird.